So imagine a situation that I think we have all been in at least once.
Oh, definitely.
You're, sitting in a boardroom, or maybe it's like a really tense family meeting, and things are just completely hopelessly stuck.
Right. The classic gridlock.
Yeah, exactly. The project hasn't moved in like 6 months. The argument is totally circular, and the energy in the room is just stale. It's heavy, and it's just silent.
Everyone is just kind of looking at their shoes.
Right. Now, most reasonable people, and, I usually include myself in this,
Yeah.
look at that situation and think, well, okay, let's just wait. Let's wait for cooler heads to prevail. Let's wait for the market to shift or the storm to pass.
It's the logical safe bet. I mean, you minimize damage by minimizing movement. You wait for the environment to become friendly again.
Exactly. It's a preservation strategy.
Mm.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into a personality type that looks at that exact same gridlock, that exact same frozen state,
Yes.
and decides to do something completely radical.
They do not wait.
They strike. And usually, they strike hard enough to just break the entire structure wide open.
It is such a fascinating dynamic. We aren't talking about someone who, floats down the river. We're talking about someone who redirects the river.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we are unpacking a really specific high-intensity report from the Max Energy ME80 personality system.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you joining us for the first time, or if you're just new to the Max Energy world in general, we really need to set the stage here, because this is not your standard, are you an introvert or an extrovert kind of survey.
Not at all. The ME80 system is incredibly granular. It's almost like an MRI for your personality.
I would like that.
Yeah, it maps out the actual architecture of your internal wiring, how you process information, how you handle emotion, and specifically how you manifest energy into the world. It's all about the mechanics of your drive.
And the specific profile we have on the table today is the WWAN.
Mm-hmm.
In the system, they call this the Destiny Counterstriker.
Even the name sounds heavy, doesn't it?
It really does. It sounds like a military designation or something. The Destiny Counterstriker.
Yeah.
So our mission for you today is to really peel back the layers of this profile. We want to understand what makes a human being look at a chaotic, stuck situation and say, I'm going to force this to move. What fuels them? And honestly, what is the cost of having that kind of power?
Because there is always a cost. This is a profile defined fundamentally as a gridlock breaker. But to break a gridlock, you have to be willing to apply just a massive amount of pressure.
Let's jump straight into the identity setting. The hero section of the report has a quote that honestly gave me chills.
Let's hear it.
It says, struck down by reality, they strike back through the cracks and rewrite unfair rules.
That really captures the essence perfectly. It's not just about winning for them. It's about rewriting.
It frames them almost like an anti-hero in a movie. The report defines the WWAN as a propulsion personality. And I want to just stop on that word for a second. Propulsion. What does it actually mean in this context?
That's a critical distinction to make. Many personality types are attraction types. They naturally draw things to them. Or they are maintenance types, where they just keep the engine running smoothly.
Right.
A propulsion personality is different. They aren't necessarily self-starters in a vacuum. If everything is sunny and calm and working perfectly, a Destiny Counterstriker might actually be incredibly bored.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. They are activated specifically by high pressure and resistance.
So they actually need the pushback to generate their own momentum.
Precisely. Think of a jet engine. A jet engine needs to compress air to generate thrust, right? The Destiny Counterstriker is extremely attuned to stagnation. When they sense that a structure is imbalanced or unfair or just decaying, that is their green light.
And that leads us right into their control mechanism. The report talks about a global vision and control philosophy, and it explicitly says they do not wait for conditions to mature.
That's the core of their philosophy. Most of us are taught to wait for the right moment, Don't rock the boat yet. Let's see what happens next quarter.
The safe route.
Exactly. But this profile believes that true outlets, true solutions, are not just granted by the universe. You don't ask for permission to fix the problem. The report says the solution is struck open through collision.
Struck open through collision.
Yeah.
That is just such a violent, visceral way to view problem solving.
It is. But you have to view it through their eyes. They see friction as fuel. If the door is locked, they don't go looking for a key. They look at the hinges and calculate exactly how hard they need to kick to take the door entirely off.
So let's unpack this a bit, because from the outside, is this just chaos? Is this just someone smashing things up because they're impatient or angry?
No, no, and that's probably the biggest misconception people have about this type. It is not random. It's driven by that global vision we just mentioned. They are constantly scanning the entire system to see exactly where the flow is blocked. They
Right.
aren't breaking things for fun. They are breaking things because they see that the current system has already failed.
I see. So to them, the wait-and-see approach is actually the failure.
Exactly. They have a profound distaste for what the report calls mediocre delays. If you tell a Destiny Counter-Striker, hey, let's table this for 6 months, you are essentially telling them, let's choose to fail slowly. And they just will not accept that.
I want to get into the mechanics of this, because the max energy system breaks this down into an energy matrix. And this is where we get into the IP, IQ, and EQ layers. It's like looking under the hood of the car.
This is my favorite part. This is where we really see the engine running.
So the overview describes his personality as having marked explosiveness and penetrating power. But then it notes a paradox. It says they possess deep foundational thinking, but it manifests as an impactful external action.
Right, because usually we think of deep thinkers as, slow, quiet types sitting in a library.
Yeah, philosophers.
Exactly. And we think of men of action as impulsive. But the WWAN is both. They do incredibly heavy internal processing, but the output is an absolute explosion.
Let's break down the specific layers to see how that actually works. So layer 1 is the IP, the inner value layer. The report labels this risk perception activation.
So think of the IP layer as their internal radar system. It's always spinning, 24/7. For the Destiny Counter-Striker, this radar is tuned specifically to find structural risks. They are scanning for cracks in the foundation that everyone else is either ignoring or just painting over.
So while I'm looking at the fresh paint in the boardroom and thinking everything is fine, they're looking at the rotting beams underneath.
That's it, exactly. Their core values are activated by instability. They perceive the risk of the status quo. That is what triggers them. They don't get out of bed to maintain a well-oiled machine. They get out of bed because they sense the machine is about to explode if someone doesn't intervene.
Okay, so the radar pings a risk. That moves us to layer 2, which is the IQ, or the emotional activation layer. This is labeled risk and consequence judgment. Now, usually when I hear emotional activation and striking back, I just assume we're talking about anger. Is this just rage?
It's not blind rage. That's really important for you to understand. In the max energy system, this IQ layer is about how you process the implications of that risk. For them, it's a pure judgment call. They are weighing the risk of acting versus the consequence of doing nothing.
So it's essentially a high-speed cost-benefit analysis.
In a way, yes, but it happens viscerally in the body. They realize that if they don't act, the collapse is inevitable. So the emotional heat comes from that judgment, the profound realization that the consequence of sitting still is far, far worse than the risk of blowing things up.
And that creates the urgency.
Correct, that's the fire.
Then we hit the third layer, the EQ, or the decision calculation layer. And this is where it gets really surprising to me. It's labeled emotional detachment and understanding.
It seems totally contradictory, doesn't it? We just said they are heated up by the risk.
Right. How can you be heated and emotionally detached at the exact same time?
This right here is the secret weapon of the Counter-Striker. To execute a strike effectively, to truly break a deadlock without making it worse, you cannot be an emotional mess. You have to be cold. This EQ layer allows them to detach from the immediate chaos of the room.
So everyone else is panicking or yelling or crying because the project is failing.
And the Destiny Counter-Striker just steps back. They understand the emotions in the room, mind you. They read the room perfectly, but they refuse to participate in the panic. They detach so they can see the precise point to hit.
It's surgical.
It is incredibly surgical. Think of a surgeon in an emergency room. The patient is crashing. People are screaming. The surgeon doesn't start screaming. The
No.
surgeon gets very quiet, very cold, and clamps the artery. They prioritize the final outcome over the fleeting feelings of the moment.
Wow. And that brings us to the final layer, the manifestation layer. This determines how the energy actually leaves the body and enters the world. And this one really threw me off when I was reading the source material. The report says the energy operates inward carrying, absorbing, integrating.
Yes, this is the piece that almost everyone misses when they deal with the WWAN.
But wait, we've been talking about them as these explosive external strikers. kicking down doors, rewriting rules. How in the world can their manifestation be inward?
This is the real aha moment for understanding this
Yeah.
profile. We see the explosion on the outside. We see the rewritten rules, the changed systems, the fired manager. But where does the force for all of that come from?
From inside.
Imagine a pressure cooker. The action, the steam venting loudly, is external. But the energy required to generate that pressure, that is all happening inside the pot. They're absorbing the stress of the situation.
So they literally take in the toxicity of the deadlock.
They take in the pressure, the resistance, the arguments, the fear from everyone else. They hold it inside, they integrate it, and they compress it. That internal compression is exactly what creates the hydraulic force for the external strike.
That sounds incredibly heavy to carry around all the time.
It is exhausting. They are like a sponge for high pressure, but a sponge that eventually fires back like a cannon. This explains why they are described as having deep foundational thinking. They aren't just reacting on a whim, they are processing an immense amount of environmental pressure internally before they ever make that move.
That makes so much sense. It really explains why they can endure situations that would just crush other people. They are quite literally built to absorb that way.
And turn it into a weapon.
Let's look closer at their inner characteristics. The report identifies a specific trait called gap breakthrough analysis.
And this goes right back to that radar we talked about. Because they are always scanning for structural flaws, they develop what the report calls a keen scent for resistance.
A scent for resistance.
If you put a destiny counterstriker in a complex bureaucratic mess, maybe a government agency or a failing corporation, within minutes they will point to one specific rule or one specific manager and say that right there is the blockage.
They lock onto the primary blockage that fast.
Immediately. And they don't just identify it, they attack it. The report states this beautifully. Action itself is the best correction tool.
I love that line. Action itself is the best correction tool.
It's so contrary to how most of us work, isn't it? We think planning is the best correction tool. The WWAN believes you correct the course by moving the ship. If you're wrong, you'll find out faster by moving than by sitting still in the harbor.
And this connects perfectly to their reaction to gridlock. The report says the more gridlocked or negated a situation becomes, the fiercer their focus and decisiveness grow.
That is the counterstriker part in full effect. If you tell them no, or if the system says impossible, they do not get discouraged. They get sharper. The resistance usually clarifies their mission.
However, and there's always a however in these deep dives, we have to look at the shadow blind spots. Because you just can't have that kind of explosive power without some collateral damage along the way.
Absolutely. Every superpower has a shadow.
The report identifies excessive offense as the trap for this profile.
Yes. Remember, they are a propulsion personality driven by pressure. So what happens when they sense disregard? Or when they feel the system is unfairly trying to suppress them?
The report says they go to maximize propulsion.
They go from 0 to 100 instantly. They trigger a total defense mechanism. And for them, defense looks exactly like offense.
The best defense is a good offense.
Exactly. But here is the problem. When you go to maximum propulsion instantly, you start listening. You stop negotiating. The report warns that this hardness closes negotiation channels. They push situations towards stark opposition.
It becomes an us versus them scenario.
And in a boardroom or in a marriage, that is incredibly dangerous. You might win the argument, but you destroy the platform you're standing on to do it.
The report mentions a phrase that I found really poignant. It says they habitually mask fragility with offense.
That's the very human side of this machine. Remember, we said they are absorbing all that pressure internally. That takes a massive toll. They are actually quite vulnerable because they are carrying so much weight for the group. But they protect that soft inner core with a very hard offensive shell.
So they break the wall.
But they might break their relationship too. The report notes they often face insufficient interpersonal repair after winning the battle. They win, the dust settles, and they look around to realize they are just standing alone in the rubble.
They didn't save any energy for the apology.
Or they don't even see the need for one, because in their mind they saved the ship. Why should they apologize for breaking the door down if the building was on fire?
That transitions perfectly into the social relationship section. The theme here is labeled high-pressure trust.
They are the impasse breaker in relationships. If you are a couple stuck in a huge decision, where to live, whether to change careers, they will cut the knot. They are very clear in their stance.
But it also says they feel stretched by sustained action pressure, so they can't always be the battering ram.
No, it's exhausting to always be the one who has to initiate the hard changes.
So who is their ideal partner? The report is very specific here. It explicitly says they do not need a cheerleader.
No. A cheerleader is nice, but a cheerleader stays safely on the sidelines. The Destiny Counter-Striker needs battle companions.
Battle companions. That's a very distinct type of intimacy.
It really is. They bond best with people who can stand right beside them in the trenches, people who can handle the heat and aren't frightened away by that explosive energy. They need someone who understands that the conflict isn't personal, it's functional.
It's trust forged in fire rather than comfort.
Precisely. If you can stand in the storm with them, you have their absolute loyalty for life.
Let's pivot to where this personality really shines professionally. Because we've established they aren't great at sitting still. The business value section calls their core advantage deadlock-breaking execution.
If I'm a CEO and my company is totally stalled, innovation is dead, office politics are rampant, nothing is shipping, I am hiring a Destiny Counter-Striker immediately.
Because they act as the defibrillator.
Forcefully. They cut right through the noise. They dismantle antiquated frames. They do not care that we've always done it this way. If the old way is the problem, the old way is gone today.
They inject what the report calls victory confidence into teams.
But notice it's not comfort confidence. It's not, hey guys, everything will be okay. It's, we are going to win this war. It's leadership through sheer force of will.
The report actually lists some specific fields where they excel. First one is crisis communications and assault.
Turning around adversity. When the PR nightmare hits, you want them at the helm because they don't freeze under the spotlight. They counterattack.
Then there's organizational transformation.
The fixers. Reorganization. Firing the dead weight. Redesigning the process from scratch. This is painful, unpopular work that most managers avoid at all costs. The WWAN leans right into it.
Online command.
High-pressure sales.
Yeah.
Market pioneering. Being the first boots on the ground in a hostile or unknown territory.
And finally, hardcore entrepreneurship.
Specifically, 0-to-1 breakthroughs. Not managing a stable 50-year-old company, but breaking a completely new market open. Creating something where nothing existed. That requires a level of brute force that this profile just generates naturally.
It's clear that this isn't a personality for maintenance mode. This is a wartime personality.
Absolutely. They are built for the storm. If you put them in a calm library, they might literally start knocking over bookshelves just to see what happens. But put them in a hurricane, and they will build you a shelter.
So what is the grand takeaway here? For you listening, maybe you recognize this in yourself, or maybe you work with someone exactly like this.
I think it comes down to the conclusion in the report, which I think is just beautiful. It says, when most choose retreat or wait, the Destiny Counter-Striker has often moved forward one step.
That is powerful.
Their ultimate value isn't just in winning the argument or closing the deal. Their value is in proving to the rest of us that rules are changeable. They remind us that we don't have to accept the deadlock. We don't have to just accept the no.
We just have to be willing to strike first.
Exactly. But a gentle reminder to the Counter-Strikers out there listening. Please check your blind spots. You can break the deadlock without breaking the people around you. The goal is to rewrite the rules, not burn the whole book.
Wise words. It's all about channeling that propulsion effectively.
Precisely.
Now, before we sign off, I want to make sure everyone knows exactly where this fascinating profile comes from. This is just one single report from the Max Energy ME80 personality assessment, and it's an incredibly deep system.
We really have only scratched the surface today. There are 80 unique profiles in this system, and the nuance in the energy matrix for each one is just astounding.
So if you want to understand more about your own energy matrix, or maybe you want to figure out why your colleague keeps metaphorically kicking down doors, you really need to explore the system. You can visit the official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
And for those of you who use social media, you can search for Max Energy, that's Max Energy, or in Chinese, Max Energy Ashu. Or you can search for Met Energy, that's Met Energy OEUEU on Facebook. There is a lot of great resource material there to help you decode these reports.
Definitely go check that out. It is an absolute game changer for understanding the mechanics of why we do what we do.
It certainly changes how you view the people around you.
It does. And, it leaves me with one final thought. We spend so much time in our modern society trying to create peace, trying to smooth out all the friction. But maybe our obsession with comfort is actually making us more fragile. Maybe we actually desperately need these counter-strikers to survive the real bottlenecks in human evolution.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. We need the storm just as much as the calm.
Something to mull over.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the Destiny Counter-Striker. Until next time, keep breaking those deadlocks.
Take care, everyone.